Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Your favorite podcast, it's Critical Plus.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to a Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, and I'm joined, as always, by Jose Fuentes.
Which one of us is Robin? Which one of us is Batman?
I don't know. Well, I've gone through actual boxing training, but I feel like you're good at the crowbar, so.
Allegedly good with the crowbar.
Yeah. Yeah, don't get Jose in a bar fight.
Right?
Someone's losing some kneecaps.
I will say that I'm such a good friend that I can say I have stabbed my own friends.
Well, I feel like, things like that happen for a lot of people. Just,
Well, we were dumb in our youth, and we actually walked around. I mean, I still walk around with a knife on me all the time, but
Yeah.
we walk around with knives and swords on us. And at any given moment, our friends would challenge each other to like knife fights and sword fights because we're dumb.
Of course, yeah. I feel like even now, like, I don't even think there's like a generational gap. I feel like it's just like a thing where like even tomboys too. If you just carry a certain level of weird energy, at some point you do sword fight your friends in the backyard.
Right?
Yeah.
At some point. I remember wrestling around, and my friend Dana, after I had moved to Iowa for a little while, some of my friends came and to come find me
Mhm.
because I didn't tell anybody I left, and we were just wrestling in the yard, and my friend Troy jumped up onto Dana, and Dana grabbed a hold of him. He's just this big black dude. I grabbed a hold of him, and I come leaping in the air after Dana, and Dana looks at me and just throws Troy into me. We collide in midair, just drop to the ground.
That's fantastic.
That is the extent of my acrobatic skills. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I mean, if you focus on that kind of air acrobatics for a couple of years, you probably could land in WWE or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
End up like the Hardys, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That would be awesome. Those guys always took a beating.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was. I mean, even like after they came back, still, I think their first match back was a classic ladder match. So
Right.
yeah, Jeff and Matt still, the guys who invented breaking your back on the ladder, essentially.
Right. Jeff and Matt Hardy, if you watch our show, come wrestle Tim. That would be awesome.
There you go. I'd be down. I think I told you this, right? But I took a couple classes at Alpha the Wild Samoan School. One is in Florida.
You did not.
Okay, yeah. I found out we went to a small like local convention. We found out that Alpha the Wild Samoan actually had a training school, like for if you want to go like learn how to do like the wrestling stuff, or like if you want to get certified as a trainer or a coach, like or as a he offered 3 certifications where you get certified as a manager, referee. So if you wanted to go through schools on how to write promos and how to transition like being like a heel on the side of the ring to be a man, like Paul Heyman stuff, or how to sell being a referee, but also this general thing was just the running drills on how to perform maneuvers and stuff without killing people in the ring.
That would be crazy. I know. I remember talking to April Hunter about like just a few, like nothing really huge, because I really at the time I really didn't like pay attention to a lot of wrestling.
Yeah.
Then I found out she was a wrestler. I was like, oh, that's super cool. And yeah, she got trained. Like she even went to, like, as far as I know, she went to like Japan and whatnot to train with the wrestlers.
Yeah, the Japan School of Wrestling is insane.
Right.
That's all the shows are just dope. That's one of my favorite wrestlers currently is Kenny Omega, and he made his name out in Japan. So when he came back to do AEW, he's great.
That's cool. Not the subject for today, but
Yeah. I mean, wrestling has story arcs though. But yes, tonight's subject is story arcs. So we might transition into talking about wrestling at some point, because I have dissected a few wrestling stories, and one of my college professors actually used to write for WWE. So yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Right. So we'll be talking about building the story arc. So kind of the looking at what a story arc is for comics, breaking down how you actually go about making one. So some general theory, I guess, if you haven't gone through creative writing classes, is going to be essentially giving you some of that creative writing college course for free, and going into the practical of it. So if you're uninitiated, I think if you read a comic, you've probably heard someone refer to something as an arc, like the
story arc.
Yeah, story arc. This is the Infinity War arc, or this is the Ultron arc, or anything like that, or even if you
storyline.
You'll also see people will they'll, like, for the most part, like collected editions and volumes are collected arcs containing several smaller issues. So an arc essentially is just a contained story within the comic, which is a beginning, middle, and end, a thread, usually a villain or a crisis is introduced. It develops and then is resolved, leading into the next arc after that, the next story arc after that. So and if you're looking at just like a single movie or a single book, or if it is just like a single run of a comic, the arc would be the skeleton that creates the beginning, middle, and end. Or we'll get into if you're working in 3 acts, which isn't necessarily always the case in comics. Usually it's 3 acts, but if you're Neil Gaiman or Alan Moore, you might work in 4 or 5 acts because
16 or 20.
you're right, because you can get away with that. Best example of that would be something Shakespearean, which everyone I'd say, if you have engaged with any sort of media, has at least run into a 5-act story, even if you don't necessarily think about it. But it's a beginning, middle, a false end, a further development, and then the proper end.
I feel that was DC's death metal.
Yes. Yeah.
That had like so many times it could have just been done and it would have been great right where it left off, and then they just kept going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and usually if it's done well, that's the thing where we realize that either the main crisis or the main bad isn't necessarily the actual ultimate bad.
Yeah.
I think Watchmen is also 5 acts.
Is it really?
Yeah, because they had.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're the chapters.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that where you get your main through line, and then it's realized that there's actually that it's not introducing something entirely unrelated. It's realizing that the threads we've been chasing don't actually lead to this point. This is solving part of the problem and then developing the last leg of the problem. So typically when I write comics, going out with the practicum, I will try to stick within a simple beginning, middle, and end, and then if I feel like I need to add a twist, I will. But usually, if I do anything, that'll be a 4th act where I just do an extended, to get fancy, denouement or resolving action. So after the crisis or big bad has been defeated, we take a little more time to wrap up the loose ends, which typically doesn't happen in comics, but with the comics I write where it's self-contained, I like to do that.
The epilogue, so to speak.
Epilogue, yeah, exactly. And now we know, Jose, we know you as the inkiest, but
Right.
yes. I know you have also talked about your own writing a little bit. So do you think about act structure all that much when you're writing, or do you when you're creating your arc at the very first stages, think about act structure at all, or do you just kind of like this is, or do you just kind of like these 3 scenes, or how do you think about it?
So when I basically did my Gothic Western, to me that was 12 issues. So I think I broke it down to 4 acts. I think that's what I broke it down to. Like each 3-issue section covered a chapter of what I was trying to tell to lead up to the final. But I haven't finished it yet, just still work in progress. But but yeah, I thought about it that way. I broke it up into like basically 3 issues, because trying to time all the way to the end that just seemed tedious. Like I couldn't get my brain around it. So breaking it up into like, okay, this is where they start, a little bit of an origin, into like the beginning of just the mess, like the mess they get into, and then even within the comic, like writing into panels. I learned how to write in script like that before I ever learned how to write any other way. You know what I mean? I mean, because if you take a creative writing class, I did, before I went to art school, I took a creative writing class, I think for like 2 years. And we were actually told to throw away our grammar book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, trash canned it. And then I would write my stories through, and I would script them out first and then wrote them, because scripting them out, it let me see it as like the timing, as the points, like that, right. And so for me, that was the easiest way to write. I guess I think I went off on a tangent on that one.
I get that. I mean, I know there's like in writing, there's the talk about like, are you a planner or a pantser? Like, do you plan your story, or do you go fly by seat of your pants? I think it's kind of a misnomer because I think everyone ends up at the same place, which I think you're a front loader or you're retroactive.
Right.
Where either you front load all of your structure into the storyline or you retroactively add it back in. Because everyone, like any completed story, is going to take multiple revisions.
Right.
So it just depends on which stage you're actually putting the structure in. I'm a front loader, so I do a lot of really in-depth outlining for my arcs, and then I'll essentially I'll keep on adding more and more detail to my outline until I've created the story. So my multiple revisions happen and turning that outline essentially into the actual script.
See, most of the time for me, it starts off with like I have an idea for a scene.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then I'll write out the scene, and then I know that I have a gist. Like I know where I want to end up. I know the scene I want at the end. I know the scene I want at the beginning. And this is like within my three issues and whatnot. Like I want this particular chapter to end here, and I'm all about the cliffhanger. I like the cliffhanger scenes. If to me it may seem like a cliffhanger, some people are just to blow right through it, but yeah, it's for me. It starts with the scene. Like once I set that scene, then I can go forward or back and set my pacing like that.
Yeah. Kasisi, a friend of the show, asks, "Do you bother writing a story Bible before you start a project?" For me, that depends on the length or scale of the project. For Wolfrunner, I did not because it's small. So I'll send it a little bit because there's room for that to turn into a long-running series. For other things, I definitely have. But if it's anything I know it's going to be wrapped up in, 6 or less issues or less than 1 or less than 2 books, I will novel size books, not comic books. I won't bother with a story Bible necessarily because everything that's getting developed is pretty much going straight into the outline. Whereas if it's something that's going to be like a longer form, like there's going to be stuff that'll develop that I won't touch for months. So I'll need to put that somewhere to keep in my head.
What does that mean?
So story Bible,
yeah.
Or I guess if we're working someone else's IP, I have to use their story Bible. So story Bible is a compendium of all the essentially facts and laws of the property you're working with.
Oh, okay.
So like with Batman is notorious for having, I think, the largest story Bible in comics, where it says like these are all these characters, they can only do this, they can't do this. These are all these locations, you can't do this in them, but you can do this. And so if you're brought on to work on an IP for someone else, they'll give you a copy of the story Bible and say like, all right, you're taking these pages, you're working within them. These are characters you're allowed to use. So essentially it's just the keeping the record of all the locations, rules of the universe, characters in it. So not necessarily an outline, but an encyclopedia.
Well, I definitely do not do that, but man, that sounds like I probably should.
I said it's handy for doing a longer form project because if you're doing something where you're not going to touch a location for months later after you've already created the concept.
Yeah,
I should probably know what's happening there when I get there.
Right.
No. Working on like some game stuff, I've definitely used it because working on a game, they'll be like, you'll get bounced around based on wherever the developers are working essentially. So like, well, no, we're working on this scene now, so we need you to create dialogue for this scene. And then you'll bounce you back over to another place like, okay, now you need dialogue over here. You have to remember like, okay, who's here? What's happening?
Oh,
yeah.
That makes sense. Like that would be important.
Okay. And what was the next thing I had on my line? Yeah. So, coming off the talk about acts, I can mention everything has a beginning, usually middle and usually an end. Not always the case, but everything always has a beginning. So in comics, especially, just as a general thing, there's that quote. There's two forms. There are two stories. There are only ever 2 stories ever told, and I kind of hate how true this is. But there's only ever 2 forms of stories that are told, which is a person goes on an adventure, or a stranger comes to town. So it's either someone leaves and sets off a chain of events, or someone comes
Shows up and
yeah. And which kind of sounds mundane when you think about it. Star Wars is episode 4, 5, and 6 is even like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are both versions of a person leaves town.
Well, yeah,
yeah, that's what happens. They leave town and the events start happening.
Shenanigans ensue.
Yes. And if you look at a few other things, I'm trying to think of a recent example. I guess to go to another Star Trek sci-fi property, Star Trek Wrath of Khan. That one is a stranger comes to town. Khan.
Sure is.
Yeah.
I never thought about that, but yeah.
Yes, I hate that, but I mean, if you look at any sort of comic, it's usually that's, especially if you're doing like something that has YA appeal, but that might be a little more on the nose. But I mean, let's see there. More things from PCs. Do we start with the end in mind, or we start with the characters taking on a journey? We'll actually get back to that. That is something that is I have down the line in our. So I have that down the line in our outline. For instance, when I was writing Wolf Hunter, even though it's a spy story, it's set in World War II. There's all this focus on machinery and the technological advancement of warfare at the time. The basic premise is a stranger comes to town. So I don't know if this is something you ever thought about, Jose, but
I never even considered that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not wrong. I get it.
Yeah. It's so something that I found that helps me when I'm outlining at they're doing the first bits of building a story arc is after don't make that be your very first thought. But if there's a point where you get your scenes figured out, what scenes you want to go to, you know what kind of characters you're working with, think about what side of the camp your storyline most leans into, because that's going to help you, further bridge some of those lines. So if you're, one of the issues that people run into when building out a story, or especially when writing it, is getting stuck in the middle. You always get us a lot of people will complain about they have a really slow middle or a really dry middle because it's not the beginning, everything's exciting and new. It's not the end with the big climax. It's just things are happening and you have to make things happen. So choosing if this is someone goes on an adventure or a stranger comes to town helps you decide who's causing things to happen.
Right.
So if you need something to happen, when we're this is if you finish your outline and you're thinking between these two scenes, there's something should happen here because it's really dry and it's really slow. Think about who should be driving the action and have them do something that leads into that next scene. And it kind of leads into our next point, which is actually building up the arcs, looking at the difference between an arc for a series and an arc for a singular issue and how they work together. So in comics, this is a particularly comic issue, in that we have a series which are 3 or 4 or 6 issues, possibly more, and each of that is also made up of, series made of 6 issues, and each issue also has to have its own story.
Yep.
And each issue needs to have its own beginning, middle, and end, essentially, as a bigger part of something which has a beginning, middle, and end. Same thing with movie series and all that. One of the big issues with the sequel trilogy in Star Wars is that there is a beginning, and then they didn't plan out the middle and end. So The Force Awakens, it's derivative, sure, but it's still solid. It hits the plot points. There is a cohesive storyline goes throughout, and then things get muddy, and you kind of lose where we are, and we're not sure what's happening, and we're like, why isn't Poe Dameron needing more screen time? He seems cool.
Much like how I explain half of what I do.
Yeah.
You start off with hitting some really good points, and then about halfway through, you're like, what was I talking about again?
Exactly.
What was the question?
And so you don't want to run out. So Jose, you already kind of mentioned this, how when you're doing your bulk outline, your series outline, you'll break it up into your, like with your current one, you broke it up into 3-issue acts or 3-issue chapters, essentially. So you created a series arc, and then you created smaller arcs within that, essentially saying like, okay, these 3 issues are telling this story. And then I imagine you went to an even more granular level, and then looked at each issue and said, okay, what part of this story is this issue telling?
Yeah, pretty much, because like the way I broke it down was that each, like I said, each 3 issues was basically its own little storyline. The first part of the first 3 issues is getting to know the characters and getting to or introducing or as the writer introducing in characters that are going to be important by the 4th chapter, right? So I have this vengeful Indian in there, Native American, and there's this like stereotypical Asian assassin who in the end, kind of like switches sides, but like after information is learned. But yeah, it's just about introducing them and some of them characters and like their interactions with the main character. And it's basically, for me, it's basically Empire Strikes Back done in 2 chapters.
No.
And then maybe we get a good resolve at the end if people like it.
There you go. Yeah.
Because I like causing calamity or causing like problems for the protagonist. I like to make, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I like for them to suffer. I feel that as a reader, as a fan of comic books myself and a creator of comics, I like to see the hero suffer, because I think that the reward at the end, the be it a victory, a semi-victory, pseudo victory, at the end, it means more if he came back from the brink of nothing.
Yeah. That's a concept that's used in a lot of classical literature and also in a lot of adventure is, the dark night of the soul, or the false death, or a bunch of other literary terms for it or whatever. But it's the idea of the moment where the hero either dies in spirit, or in some cases literally dies, to get brought back and then learn and become stronger after that point.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was working on Wolf Hunter, I kind of had the benefit of it being a 3-issue series, so it was very clear this is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end. So I knew exactly what each thing had to do for the greater series arc. I knew exactly how I needed to partition out, but and so I knew that at the very end of issue 1 we had to establish the greater plot for the next 2 issues.
Right.
But issue 1 also needed to have its own plot, because having a book that is 23 pages of setup and 1 page of action happening is boring. So it had to have its own moment where there had to be another struggle within that issue that the character had to overcome. So that's when it becomes a thing of focusing and building a specific arc just for a singular issue that ties into the larger arc, and giving it its own beginning, middle, and end. Looking at the first issue being, it starts with the Blitz, the second Battle of Dover, and that's the one where the character gets incapacitated. So we have a clear start in action, in media res, if you will, and a inciting incident where the protagonist gets severely injured, and I also kind of foreshadow some issues that he has that will lead into his Dark Night of the Soul later on. And then the story then becomes about him overcoming the blow to his confidence that those complications have initially given him, and figuring out what his new purpose is going to be going forward, and then the action develops even more so going into the next issue, but creating a character-driven first issue that also then ties into a plot-driven moment. So this ties into my question here. So looking at developing a series arc or an arc for an individual issue, in your experience with your current comic, Jose, that you're right now, what are some of the challenges you've found with either side of that, or if there's a side that you prefer?
I think the longer arc is easier. Just because you have time to work it out, like you have time to move the details around. Like if something doesn't work out right or your timing is off, you can like adjust it on the next issue. You know what I mean? I'm not quite sure that answers the question.
Again, that's the idea is that you one of the issues with working in the smaller side of that is that you are more constrained in time.
Yeah.
When you're looking at the big picture, you have an idea of where you can figure everything out. But especially in comics where you have a hard page count most of the time, although now with digital and print on demand, you can kind of play around with that if you have your own publishing system. But if you're stuck with 22 or 24 pages, you're like, okay, I need to get this done in this amount of time. I can't really finagle it too much.
And then you want, like, I keep talking about timing. Timing is important. Like I wouldn't have thought that when I first got into comics. Like I was like, timing, what are you talking about?
Right.
But it is like when you're creating. When I wrote my Gothic Western, I did panels, like thumbnail panels. Like I paneled it out so I knew how many panels I wanted per page, so that I can, like, my flow kept moving. And I didn't always nail it. I didn't always get it right, but you know what I mean, as a whole. And then the penciler that actually did it for me at the time, because I wasn't confident enough to do it myself, but the penciler that did it for me, like, really was really good about, like, he's like, oh, like, what if I did this here? What if I changed this here? I was like, oh yeah, dude, that's awesome. Like, let's do that. Or no, that throws off the next couple pages. You know what I mean?
Right.
But he was very receptive to any, like, advice from my end and whatnot. It wasn't just, I know there are some pencils like, no, like, this is how I'm doing it, this is how it's going to be. Like, I've actually had a guy say that when I had to ink his stuff in, and like, I was like, dude, that's not going to work. That doesn't make any sense. He's like, no, just ink it. Just ink it. I'm like,
all right.
Editor, what say you?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, timing to me is important, because with having so little pages for, like, the shorter arc, you know what I mean? You have to, like, really try and get everything in there. You have to hit all the points you want to hit, which when I do my thumbnails for my scripts and whatnot, I always make sure I know where my points are. Like, this page, the point is to do this, like, on this page. Like, when I transition into this page, this is the point I'm trying to hit on this page. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, or like in a couple pages, I need my point to be hit by this page. So it's not easy to me anyway. It's not easy like that, because I'm not normally a writer. Just, when you have a story to tell in your head, you kind of just want to get it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, that's for who it said. Who was it? It's probably some weird creator from the 60s who I learned about because I was reading about their drug habits. But I think it was a writer who had said,
that sounds like a rabbit hole tangent.
Yeah, was writers will exhibit some form of psychosis, only instead of letting it, only instead of having a split perception of reality, we just force it out into the world.
Right.
So you always have this, like, split perception somewhere, and something that just needs to get out. Is either you perceive things weirdly, or you start vomiting words.
You make everyone else believe your perception.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're going to get to Kasisi's question here. And then we kind of talked about setting these points up, and I kind of talk about how I set up the first issue of Wolf Hunter, that transition that arc from a character-driven arc to a plot-driven arc, plot-driven arc. When you're creating your story outline, thinking about moments that are going to be character-driven, moments that are plot-driven. Is it altogether plot-driven storyline, or is it altogether character-driven storyline? And both work in comics. You can have completely character-driven comics, which are, things kind of like Sandman. And these are going to be your stories that are more so the character leaves town type storylines, where the character is the one who is leaving, setting off the chain of events. And they're the ones who are now pursuing a goal or pursuing something intrinsic to their character, which is causing things to happen around them. Whereas plot-driven things, and some people say, something is plot-heavy, as if it's a bad thing. I don't think it is. Plot-driven storyline is more so the stranger comes to town, which is the idea is that events are happening and the character needs to be ready to meet them because something is happening to them, essentially. And this can be a bad thing if it's just, going from set piece to set piece to set piece. But,
Right.
this is the idea of the was kind of the first two John Wick movies were very character driven. This last one, and I believe it was more so plot driven. The idea of someone has come to kill John Wick, and so he has to essentially meet them at all these different points and be ready to do that. Whereas before, he is the one who's out seeking something. Now someone's coming seeking him.
Right. That's how that was basically Parabellum. Was it that the third one?
Yes,
that was plot driven.
Yeah. And so that's an idea of like, you're not having the story tell the characters what to do. The characters are still making their own decisions and forming themselves how they're going to meet these things. It's just that something is happening to them and they have to be more reactive.
Right.
So a lot of video games, by the nature of it being a video game, are plot driven because it's the idea of, or also, in essence, also kind of Karate Kid, right? It's the moment where the character has to go out and train and prepare themselves to meet a moment that's going to happen. They can't change the moment. They can't go out and seek something else. The moment is happening, and they have to go on their arc to be ready for it.
Right.
Yeah. So, my example for this with Wolf Hunter issue 1 being character driven, something happened to the character, and they have to go out and seek their meaning. The overall series is still plot driven because it's events are happening. Someone has come to unravel things, and that's kind of forcing everyone's hand. But the character is making the choice to step into these moments at the start and finding them, and is using that to find James Wolder's using that to find his meaning there. And at that point, so he is going out. I can say this is intentional by using the prison hospital using the military hospital as a prison metaphor. It wasn't, but I'm going to say it was. There's a moment where he feels trapped in this
I'm
thing.
playing that all along.
Yeah. He chooses to go out and make an escape to find that he's actually been offered essentially a chance to return to duty. And he then makes that moment to make that choice to say like, okay, this is what I wanted anyway, so I'm gonna start taking things. And you see that there are moments where the plot is happening to him, but he's still making the choices to accept different moments, and he's reluctant at times. And then at the end of issue 1, the plot happens to him. He has no choice. He now needs to be reactive. And then it's a matter of him going through these moments, engaging with his. They don't have like a training montage or anything like that, but understanding his own tool set and spending time to think about what he's good at in order to refocus and be ready for the final confrontation. So it switches from being character driven to plot driven. Soul Ascendant is entirely plot driven. Dark energy. You kind of turned into a robot there.
I said, is that everyone is thrusted into it?
Everyone's thrusted into it. Yeah. Essentially, the main character is not in a world where there are omnipotent beings. The main character is not one, but is given power by one, and another one has. And now there is this dark energy which is starting to infiltrate the Roman pantheon and their chosen champions.
It should always be champions.
Yes. I want to say paragon and champion at the same time. But
I did that with my daughter. We say every time like something happens, if things are going on and you want to, like, all of a sudden like something jumps, like interrupts whatever they're doing. It's like, oh, plot twist, right?
Exactly.
We changed it into side plot because I said it wrong, because I meant to say side. I think I meant to say side quest and plot twist, and I ended up saying side plot.
That's awesome. But yeah, so and now the character is reacting to all these things that are happening to him and figuring out how to figure out how he gets the power necessary and where his motivation aligns with the world and how it's currently shaping around him. So we'll grab your thoughts on character-driven versus plot-driven, Jose, and then we'll go to Cassisi's question.
Okay. I think you said it, like, you can't have one without the other, really. Like, there in any plot-driven story, there's going to be character-driven anything in it. You know what I mean? Like, be it learning one thing or another. I actually like character-driven stories because I like the idea that the character, whatever step they make, it's unfolding more of what, the complexity of the story, as opposed to no matter what the character does, the plot is still going to happen. You know what I mean? I can't think of an example of that one, but like I like it where the story, where the character, whatever the character does is what is, what I mean, it is progressing the plot.
Yeah.
But like I said, you can't have one without the other. You know what I mean? You can't.
Yeah.
The overlaying plot of my Western is, you know what I mean, it's redemption or revenge.
Yeah.
That's
kind of no matter if the character is out making choices and driving it, the character is still going to cause moments of plot to happen.
Right.
And if the plot is happening to the character has to make choices on how they react. I
think most stories, I feel anyway, it starts. I want to say they start off like, you think, was it Divine Right is an old Image book, things like that, or even the storyline for Inhumans, the War of Kings.
Yeah,
I mean, those were based off character-driven plot. Like Black Bolt wanted to take the Inhumans off the moon and whatnot, right?
Yeah,
and that created a string of events that forced the plot onto them, which is Vulcan and the Shi'ar Empire attacking them, right? And Divine Right, like it's about this kid who was a nobody and he got these like powers because of a formula he read online, and because of that, it started a chain reaction of like, government people coming after him and whatnot, and different like sects. So I mean, I think all stories, for the most part, start off as character-driven stories and then evolve into like, or I guess spill the character into the plot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's not to say you can't do it the other way around, though, because Spawn is one where it starts off being very plot-driven. Person dies, is given dark powers, and is then forced to essentially be the Devil's Hitman for a little bit, and then realizes that he has more and more agency. He doesn't necessarily have to do it this way, and starts pursuing his own actions after that point, which of course will cause more conflict and more plot to happen. But it's
right. That's a valid point, actually.
Yeah. And so it's you're going to have one or the other. It's just when you're for the audience, when you're creating your storyline, which one are you focusing on at what moments? Essentially, don't try to get too caught up on one or the other. Just realize like, oh, this is a very character moment, or this is a very plot moment. And then once you realize that, you can lean into that, and that'll help you solidify more background. Like, everyone loves very nuanced and artsy stuff, but that'll come after you spend a lot of time hammering out the basics of what the scene is.
Right.
All right. Kasisi asks, have you two done any projects where there are multiple character arcs in a single issue? If so, what's your thought process to build that? With Soul Senate, there is a character gets introduced. This book isn't out yet, so it's kind of spoiler territory, but not really. I'm not going to talk about what's happening. But I guess that's the premise for the first thing. But the idea of, especially within the Roman pantheon and with a lot of mythological pantheons, is there these different domains, and there's a law, especially in Rome, where it's very legalistic. There's a law of domains. Gods cannot touch other people's domains without there being huge issues. So the main problem is that Sol, the god of the sun, chooses a champion from Earth, which is Terra's domain. And so at that point, Terra would have the legalistic right to essentially go to war with Sol or do stuff, but she isn't. So, and a lot of people are like, oh, this means a lot of really bad things about what's happening to the gods right now. Terra's nowhere to be found, and gods are now able to act outside their domain. There it causes issues for one of these characters who is a priest of Jupiter. So the thought being like, oh, when we inhabited the solar system, we found the gods. They're benevolent. Rome is right. The planets are gods. And however, now one of them may not be, one of them might be dead, and our understanding of how they work isn't necessarily what we thought it was. So he's having a faith issue. And he has to go, and during this, so he's going essentially, he joins on with Invictus. They go to Jupiter, because Jupiter is if you're not familiar with Roman mythology, Jupiter is the high god. If you ever wondered where the term Jove came from, that was the old word for Jupiter.
He's Zeus. I give you
Yeah.
like the parallels between the Grecian and Roman.
Yeah,
He's Zeus.
Exactly. And so Invictus has to go out and essentially fight a battle with the Paragon sisters. I forgot their names, but the two biggest moons of Jupiter that were wow, how am I forgetting their names? One starts with an M. It's right there. It's right there.
You can do it. You can do it.
Oh god.
Let's see. You sure it starts with an M?
I think it was not the reason, but I think it was Europa and Minerva.
Okay.
Yeah. It might have been Callisto.
Europa is one of them.
It might have been Callisto Minerva. I know Minerva is one of them. That's the M one I was thinking of. I just look up the script. I have it there. Anyway, he's doing his thing with them. They're fighting against said dark forces that are trying to assault the throne of the high god. And this priest is like, this whole religion thing isn't the religion that I thought it was that I've been teaching. So I'm going to go and do my own thing and talk to Jupiter while I'm here. And so, yeah, that became a very classic of bouncing between the slower, I would say down to earth, but the concept is absolutely not. But down to, well, I guess, struggling with faith is a very human thing. So the slower down to earth moment of this priest going to the temple to meet with their god and understand what's happening, switching to literal space demigods fighting titans on the moons of a gas giant. And balancing those acts between. So it's a moment of building tension in one and then cutting to the other. So there's a balancing act you want to have in pacing, which is you want to always be turning up the tension, but you don't want to give your reader a heart attack. in comics, I say you can kind of screw that. They got 22 pages. Make the entire 22 pages feel like they're cutting teeth, and then the last page, give them some breathing room.
Right.
Yeah. Because they're going to have to wait some time for the next issue. So if you just have someone who's like, overly ancient, well, if you do it really well, you can absolutely just like pull teeth and the last page, rip it out, and then they're like craving the next issue. But, make sure you do it really right. Otherwise, give them a little bit of breathing room. So they're more so stoked for the next issue rather than in a panic.
Right.
I said you can do it right, though, and actually make people panicked. And that's kind of, I think it was like book 2 or book 3 of Game of Thrones had done that. But yeah, so I would create moments of tension where the heroes are doing something. Oh, wait, it's not working as planned. Cut to the priest meeting stuff. He's going somewhere. That's not the answer he wanted. Cut to the heroes are reconvening. They're doing something better. Okay, that's going a little better. Is it going to work out? We don't know. Go back to the priest. He's doing this thing. He's getting more context on the situation. Things are darker than it seemed like they were. What does this mean? Cut to the heroes doing their own thing. So it's a moment of you're giving answers, ending with a question or a proposition of some kind, and then cutting to the next one. And then at the end, he gets the situation. He has a way forward. He kind of has an idea of what to do. Oh, the heroes have actually, their plan worked. And so it's the balancing act of going between the two, of racking up tension and then giving that breathing space at the end.
That seemed very like everything up front, like for the fight, like you just get, it's exactly what it is. You know what I mean? It's action and whatnot going on, but like then it's the cut scene, some introspection.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And to go back to the fight scene, because Star Wars did the same thing. Star Wars did the same thing when the rebels were fighting the Death Star. You know what I mean? Was it in Return of the Jedi? And Luke Skywalker was having his moment with Palpatine. You know what I mean? With like the dialogue, the realization that your people are gonna get screwed. Blah blah. Then back to the action, and then back to the slower dialogue. I don't think that I haven't done anything where I put the parallels of multiple characters. Not per se. Like my two protagonists for my Western is a former priest named Chance and a former nun named Seraphine, and their parallels kind of run together with a little bit of like variance here and there, but like I don't know, from what I understand from Cassisi saying that having multiple character arcs, not separate.
Mm-hmm.
Chance and Seraphine's arcs merge together. She's leading herself down a road of destruction, and he is too, but he sees it as a higher mission to redeem Seraphine, because he feels she's the one who needs to be saved, not him. He's willing to start off light and make himself darker to take the darkness away from her. So not necessarily like different arcs, but like their arcs kind of sort of run parallel.
Yeah, thanks for that. So Minerva and Myrmidon are future spoilers, so don't mind them. This was the ascendant of Juno and the ascendant of Jupiter. So
okay.
So Juno was Jupiter's wife, and also she is kind of same idea where she is also, whereas Jupiter is, whereas in Greek mythology Zeus is kind of the god of horndogging, Jupiter is the god of spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets.
Because the Romans are like, okay, but also we really like logistics and everything. So what if our gods were more meticulous?
Right.
So
our gods are heathens.
Yeah.
Your gods are wrong. We're gonna clean them up.
Yeah. So Jupiter's like, of course, being the god of everything, he's a god of administration. Because administration rules everything. And Juno's the tactical side of that, whereas he's like Jupiter is the overall application, which leads to being like a very civilian-minded god. Juno is the Roman's also very much into like the empowerment of women to be very passionate. So Juno is the passionate side of administration. So she is tactical administration.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the characters I'm thinking of. Let's see here. Okay, and that's our last note that I have here is another very comic-y, uniquely comic problem we run into. Leaving room for follow-up and tag-on storylines. So how complete do you complete a story when you're writing a comic? Because if the big two have taught us anything, is that you can have one storyline go on for 80 years.
I mean, that's the dream, right? That's Spawn. Right?
Yeah,
that's
like I want. Yeah, I want royalties until after I'm dead.
Right.
Yeah.
That's One Piece.
Yeah,
That's what that is.
Yeah, that's One Piece. Yeah,
but I feel I have a bad habit of I want everything to be a nice, clean ending.
Mm-hmm.
My vision was, from this issue to this issue, and that's it. I get there and I'm done. And then afterwards, I'm like, crap, I should have left a few loopholes so that I could spin off and keep going if people are interested in it. But I don't. My brain doesn't work that way. It should. But
I'm not a fan of leaving the main thing unraveled a little bit. The main issue. Especially because Wolf Hunter is 3 issues. That's it. There is one point at the end where if we want to continue on past that, we can, but we don't need to.
Right.
The plan for Wolf Hunter is actually to do one front and then transition to another front. So it'd be like a subtitle. It'd be like, a Wolf Hunter Warsaw would be a member of the Polish Resistance or something like that. With Soul Senate, there's no more room for it because it's designed to be a bigger, grand scale thing. Dealing with space pantheons. At some point you got to get the Norse pantheon and Egypt and Japan in there and all that. Kind of ripping off Stargate and saying that our perception of pantheons just came from alien races that have messed with us in the past. I like wrapping up the main. Like the main villain should be dead or in handcuffs in some way.
Right.
However, you could always have a moment where a supporting character comes to the main character, be like, "All right, that's great, but can you help me with this other thing I got going on back home or whatever?" Which can then kind of, if as a reader myself, I felt cheated when it happened at the end of a thing. Like a lot, like this happened a lot in like mid 2000s comics and even before then, where the arc would end and then by the way, it's not a complete arc, or by the way, there's more going on after this.
Right. I like how was it Frank Miller's 300 ended. Like in the book, even the one dude kind of just wandered off and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I thought that had a pretty nice ending.
Yeah.
The comic, not so much the
right.
The movie was pretty close, right? The movie was pretty close for the most part, but we're they're rallying the army for pushing the Persians out of Greece. We're like, okay, yeah, by itself, this is a good ending, but it leads itself to a natural thing if you wanted to go there. Right.
I
like the idea, before. So I wrote or created my Western. It's called Dark Redemption, but I created that way before I ever saw Book of Eli, right? But I love the ending to Book of Eli.
Yes.
I was like, someone was inside my brain.
Right.
Like, what the heck? You were in my brain, my dude. So the ending can go in various directions. The main story, the main plot of the story, the main the overlaying plot gets resolved. It has to. It absolutely has to. In my brain, I can't see it. It's not death metal. Sweet Christmas. That went on forever, 15 years, I swear. But it has to have an end. You know what I mean? If results at the end lead to another continuation or a divergence of one of the characters, then cool.
Mhm.
I can see that. Just like in the Book of Eli, you know what I mean? If you haven't seen the Book of Eli, people, then it's your fault, not mine.
Mhm.
And I mean that in the most loving way possible. But in the end, you know what I mean? What happens to Eli, right? Um, and then the cycle kind of starts anew with Mila Kunis's character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like that doesn't bother me. That to me that seems like a natural progression into, you know what I mean, a new storyline, a new option. Like
Mhm.
even when I saw the end of that, I was like, I would watch a movie with her continuing on with the story. You
Oh,
know what I mean? That
100%.
would be
Yeah.
kind of cool
And
because she didn't have the skills he did. She didn't have the difficulties that he did. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So she's going into it fresh and new and learn, a whole new learning process. And I think
Yeah.
that's cool.
Speaking of Book of Eli, a kind of side tangent. The writer of Book of Eli, Gary Whitta, now has a narrative podcast called War Dog, which is great science fiction. Aliens come to Earth, are actually benevolent, but humans don't trust them. Humans mess it up, and we end up losing the war because people at the top got a little greedy.
Oh man.
And so it's about people then now living with the effect that we didn't need to go war with aliens, but we did, and this is what happened to Earth in the after effect of that. And
Wow.
robots are a thing, mechas. And it follows the daughter, who is the daughter of one of the last great mecha pilots, essentially, of the human army before humans lost. So,
I like mech pilots.
yeah. So
You
it's
ever watch I'm sure you have or was it Pacific Rim, The Black?
yeah. Yes, yeah.
Great
Great.
show.
Yeah. But I mean, also Pacific Rim, kind of a good idea. We're talking about this where, yeah, you get in like, okay, we stopped the kaiju. Did we?
Right.
Yeah. Whereas that idea of you can solve the issue and then give a little bit more at the end of it, where like a really good ending to a lot of things, the classic spy movie or whatever is, the end of like, you got the job. Like, so like if you weren't interested at all, like, great, he did the thing and now he's getting rewarded for it. But if you're interested in it, you want to get more like, oh, but now what's the job?
Right.
And you can also do this with my favorite way of doing this is with side characters, where a lot of stories have this, where they come out, they help the hero for a little bit, something happens, like, okay, I have to go deal with this other thing, so they leave, and so like for the rest of the story, like, great, doesn't matter, something else is going on, but that gives you room to add in a second part where maybe the hero needs to go help him with this other thing, or maybe that is the second storyline or whatever. Kind of like the guy leaving the Hotcakes on 300 to go rally your army is like, okay, great, that's its own thing, doesn't matter for us of this movie, but can be used for the second movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I wrote, and I don't think I made a pet. I think I ended up writing just for issue 1, and then somebody was going to do the artwork for it, and it never panned out. Like, it ended up
Mhm.
just, I honestly don't even know where the script is now. But the entire first issue is 4 parts, like 4 different characters, and I took some of the characters, a couple of the characters from this particular story. I called it On the Lam, right?
All right.
And it's just about people, these group of 4 people, like running from a posse, like being ran out of town, and like the inspiration came from Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. You know
Nice.
what I mean? Like I was inspired by the end. You know what I mean? When they're in
Yeah.
that little house and whatnot, and then they come charging out. Like that was my inspiration for the story. But like the whole rest of the comic, and like I said, I started with the end on that one and worked my way back, because I worked my way back into each character's like connection. And so the one's like this kid who's he thinks he's like the best gunslinger in the world, but he's not. But he's really good at cards. But like his whole like thing is to like try and convince everyone he's the best, and he's not. He's rubbish. And then this girl who's out to like hunt somebody down, and another Native American, and then a Mexican. And uh each time like it goes back to tell the next person's story, you see you see them crossing the other person's
Nice.
storyline. So like
Uh,
the first storyline is the card playing kid, you know what I mean, like just swindling people and people getting mad and like wanting to kill him and whatnot. And then the next one is the vengeful girl, and while she's like coming into the saloon and whatnot, you see the kid playing cards, and then next is like the Mexican coming into town, and then you see the both the kid and the girl, you know, at different parts in his storyline. The beginning, like you see the kid going into the bar, and then you see the girl running out of it, and then it just I interwove them so that they were all touching somehow,
okay.
and in the end, like they pretty much just charged out, and that was like my cliffhanger for the end of the thing. Like I said,
Nice.
it was inspired by Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Let's see. I think that's all the notes I had. So yeah. That's everything I have on story arcs. Jose, do you have anything else you need to add, or?
Um, no, I think I'm just gonna change my title on here to "Remember the Timing."
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Thank you, Kizzy. Thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks, Kasisi.
thanks for questions. Yeah. The pacing. It's something. Every good story can be made or broken by pacing. Essentially,
Yeah.
you can even make a bad story better by just having it paced well. Um, most recently, the Destiny 2 Lightfall expansion. They give you no context for anything. There's no explanation. The story itself for the campaign is not great. The lore after that is fantastic, so it's worth picking up because you end up the lore after the fact is great, but the pacing of the story, even though you have no context, no idea what's going on, the story doesn't make sense. The pacing of the nonsense is fantastic. There's urgency and moments of relief. There's everything. You understand that everything is happening for purpose and why things are happening at the speed they are. You just don't know what those things are. So
Nice. That's cool.
That's saved part of the story for me. Is like oh, I get the speed here. Like there's not like it's nonsense that makes no sense, but it's happening at a rate at which this nonsense should happen.
Sounds like an organized hot mess.
Exactly. Yeah, that's entirely it. Yeah. And there's a lot of things like that. Like there's a lot of great movies that just feel like they drag on forever because they don't have the pacing right. But then you also got some things where, Bill and Ted 3, not the best outing for the group, but I had fun and I didn't feel like the movie was as long as it was. So the pacing worked well for it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and there were some like was it There Will Be Blood? Great movie, but like it got slow in the middle. Yeah. Like, okay, is this going to what's going to happen? Something needs to happen because I'm literally falling asleep.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great movie though. Like, was it Daniel Day-Lewis? Like that dude is freaking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then was it Paul Dini? Right? No, Paul Dini's what's his name? The dude that played the Riddler.
Paul Dano.
Paul Dano. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, Paul Dano. He plays a priest in that, and he was awesome. I think he's a great actor anyway.
That was good.
Like I wasn't a big fan of the Riddler character, and I'm sure people are gonna throw rocks at me about that one, but the Riddler character I don't think was done well, but Paul Dano did a great job with what he had.
Yeah, it's a weird take on Riddler, but Paul Dano absolutely sold the crap out of it.
That guy. I mean, he's young. I've watched him do movies where he was young, and he's really good. Like he's definitely like a really good actor.
Yeah. And also having him, Robert Pattinson got a lot of flack for a while, but that was his youth. Yeah. He's a really good actor. So having Paul Dano opposite Robert Pattinson, like in peak grim dark emo Robert Pattinson, yeah, that was very. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to have to like friggin' sparkly vampire guy for Batman at all, but yeah, I was impressed. I enjoyed that movie. That movie was great. the car chase scene was the best car
Oh,
chase
God.
scene in
Oh yeah.
any movie, even friggin' Gone in 60 Seconds. It was a better
That's
car
so
chase
good.
scene than that.
Yeah.
And because it actually had cars in the way, they had to get
Actually-
around. It was great.
Oh yeah. And cars are actually working like cars would, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's it? Colin Farrell appearing as the
Oh my
Penguin.
gosh.
Yeah.
Penguin, right?
Yeah, is it? But just the way that he also acted in that chase scene, just
Yeah.
that, yeah, yeah. All right, we could talk about that movie another time.
Man.
I know. This has been Silverline Show on a Silverline Show on Tuesday. Be sure to check out Wednesday Wham on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, and Silver Sunday 8 p.m. Eastern as well. Next week we have a special guest. Let me figure out who that is.
Oh yeah. Melanie? No. What is it? She's super cool. She has a steampunk book out, right?
Yeah.
And she's got like 30 something successful Kickstarters.
Yes.
Like super cool.
All right, there you go.
And
Madeline Holly Riley.
yes, Madeline, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, Madeline, didn't mean to.
I know.
But I started watching because she was graceful enough to like come on one of our was it Sunday stream last week? I think it was Sunday or Wednesday. No, it was Wednesday. And I wanted to watch it, and I started watching it, and I had only had like less than 2 hours of sleep that night, and I'd been up all day, and so I'm sitting here watching. I'm like, this is awesome. And I was out.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm really glad she's coming out to ours.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah, it'll be good. So I believe you do also have some material that we'll be studying before then. So
Right.
We'll see you all next week at that 8 p.m. Pacific time again. Until that time, make mine
Silverline.
Yes.
I'm April Hunter. Make mine Silverline.
All right.